I felt like it was time to like tell my pastor like that I believed in these things. He just kind of looked at me and was like, Cheyenne, I can't believe you've been deceived by these people. Like if you keep going down this path, like it's going to be really bad for you. And I was like, why?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Saints Unscripted. We are your hosts. I'm Alex.
I'm Lauren.
And today we have with us Cheyenne, who is going to be telling us about her conversion story, which we love a good conversion story here on Saints Unscripted. So we can't wait to just get started. Let's just jump right in. So where does this all start for you? Is there like a specific point where this all started, or was it just kind of gradual?
Yeah, it started when I was about like 14 years old.
Okay.
So, little tiny
awesome.
Like story. And I'm from Texas. So, my family isn't very religious at all. I didn't grow up going to church. And, one day I felt really pulled to go to a certain church that my school bus like drove by every single day. And so one day I was just like, Mom, can you take me here? And so I did. And I just went and I started going, and I really liked what the pastor was teaching, and it was so good, and I was like, oh, I want to be a part of this. So I was going, and then I started getting really involved with it. I introduced myself to the pastor. I was getting involved with like the youth group. I started singing in the youth band because it was like rock band church. I went to the Assemblies of God, like a breakaway of that, and I was teaching in kids' church, and all of my friends that I went to church with were like my friends, my family, and it was great. And so I had like family life, and then I had like church life. I made it a big part of my life. Sunday, you went to church like at 9 a.m., 11 a.m., and then like 6 p.m. and on Wednesdays.
Wow.
So it was busy.
Yeah.
And then you had like church band practice in between. And then at school, I was like the kind of girl that would like write Bible verses and put them in people's lockers. And like, I was like the Jesus girl at school, and everybody knew it. And, and it was really cool. And so, and when I was a junior in high school, I sat next to somebody that was a member of the church, and I had known that they were because I had known them since like 8th grade, but I really didn't know much about it except for like the teeny little things of like gossip you hear. And I was really impressed with how they spoke so kindly to people, and they were just really good examples. Like they wouldn't gossip, or they'd be like, please don't like say bad language around me, and like they would talk about like the Savior, and I was like, nobody like talks about the Savior as much as I talk about the Savior. Like this is real new and refreshing.
These are my people.
Yeah. And so I started like asking a little bit more, and they would invite me to stake dances, which were so fun. I went to like a youth conferences, which were really fun. But also I was like, oh, they have some stuff that I don't believe in. Like there was like the Book of Mormon and all of this other like temples and all this stuff. So I was really intrigued by it, and my friend invited me to come to church one day, and I was like, okay, I'll go to your church, you go to my church. It's a pretty common thing, and it was pretty good. It was a lot more reverent than my church, because I'm used to like lights and big microphones.
Yeah, you were
like,
saying it was like the rock and roll
pumped
kind of
up,
stuff.
like evangelical, like
that's very different,
entertaining church. And so when I went, I was like, oh, okay, this is a little bit boring, but I was just so like drawn to it, and so I like went to church, and I was just really interested. I was like, okay, like what do you believe in and stuff? And he was telling me a little bit about it, and he's like, you should meet with the missionaries. And I was like, no, because missionaries save people, and I'm already saved. So I just kept doing like the little tiny things, like going to church sometimes, going to seminary sometimes, doing this, and just like liking it. And then I went back to my church on the regular Wednesday nights, and I asked my pastor, like, what do Mormons believe in? And I think out of very good faith, he told me what he thought was true, but definitely not true.
Sounds about right.
Some stuff that was really unsettling and weird, and I was like, ooh. I was like, I don't even think my friend knows that. Like, and so it was just strange, but I didn't like totally use that excuse to like write that off, and I was still like really involved or really interested in the LDS Church because there was just something about it. And now I know what it is, but I didn't know what it was before. So I kept going. And I was invited to girls camp one time, and I remember like not wanting to be like the oddball. Like everyone's like, oh wow, you're new. Like that's so cool. Like just the one that wasn't like a part of the group. So the night before I like stayed up really late and like memorized I Am a Child of God song and like the youth theme for that year. And
you're like such an overachiever. You're
I
just
know.
involved to the max,
well,
right?
I just didn't want like, I don't know, like I didn't want to not like seem out of the crowd. Like I just wanted to.
You just wanted to fit in
to
and
be
feel
there
like
and
you
like
belonged.
and see, because I wanted like it was like a youth camp and I wanted to like feel God and all this stuff. And
absolutely.
So and it was so much fun. And I remember at the end they like had all the girls like sing up and sing the youth theme for that year, which was Stand in Holy Places. And I remember singing that song and being really proud that I memorized it, but also being proud like singing with all these people. And as I sang it, I felt something inside of me that I had never felt before. And I was just like, this is amazing. Like, I think I feel the Spirit. And I really struggled to feel the Spirit, I guess, at my old church, because it was like speaking in tongues and just like really loud. Like I just didn't know like what the simplicities of like the Spirit was. So that was something I like really struggled with. But I just remember being like, I felt the Spirit. And I remember going to someone, like a leader at my other church, and telling them like, I think I felt the Spirit at their girls' camp. And they were like, that's impossible. And I was like, how is that impossible?
Wow.
And they were like, well, it's a different Spirit. It's a different Jesus. It's a different God. And I was like,
it's not. Yeah.
I know. Yeah. I was like, I don't think so. Like, I've been around them a lot. And they're like, yep. And I was like, that just seems like a really, like, easy answer to just blow off. Like,
right. To be
church.
dismissive.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, okay. That was, like, just unsettling to me. And so I was like, okay. And then I just didn't have a lot of time to go because then I was reaching my senior year. And so I was just really busy. But one day my friend asked me to come to church, and it was like at 3 p.m. And I was like, that's weird. And he was like, well, we just built this new building, and it just got like the board got reorganized and stuff. And I was like, I really have no excuse to miss it, so I'll go to church. And that day, instead of like being bored and like just like looking at the multicolored carpet or something, I was listening to the testimonies that were being given. It was a testimony meeting, and I felt really touched inside. And then afterwards, I was like, yeah, I'll go to Sunday school. So I went to Sunday school, and they were teaching about the Great Apostasy and like the Restoration. And I forgot something. Okay, can I like go back? Yeah. Oh, sorry. I'm like, okay, in high school, my friend reapproached me and was like, you should take lessons from the missionaries. And I was like, okay, fine. I started meeting with the missionaries, and they taught me, but I really wasn't listening. So I think they taught me all of like the things from Preach My Gospel, but I was just like more distracted and like was like, oh, this is fun and stuff. And I would like ask my like random anti-Mormon questions, and they'd be like, oh, okay, like we can get to that later, but like here, let's talk about this. So I went to Sunday school, and the little old man teacher was teaching about the restoration, the Great Apostasy and the Restoration. And he was like teaching about like the priesthood and how the priesthood had been like gone from the earth and how it was like restored. And he was like, that's why like our only church has like, we are the only church that has the priesthood. And I was like sitting there getting offended, but I didn't want to like say anything to him because he was like this cute little old man. And so instead of talking to him about it and like being with my peers, I like left the room really fast and knocked on the bishop's door and was like, and he was conveniently there. And I was like, I have a lot of questions to ask you. And he was like, okay. And so he like welcomed me in. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. I feel so important. And I was asking him these questions about like the priesthood and this. And so he taught me the Restoration. And then he like taught me the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I had already been taught these things before, like the gospel of Jesus Christ from my old church, of course. The Restoration, the missionaries talked about it a little bit. Like I watched the movie. But my heart like wasn't ready for it. And so now my heart was finally like ready to receive like all of these answers. And I really wanted to know all these things. So I see that as like a turning point. And the bishop like wrote down the plan of salvation like the missionaries had done before. But finally, like I looked at it and I was like, and it was like when you like close your blinds and then when you wake up in the morning and like open them and there's like a flood of sunlight, that's like how I felt looking at the plan of salvation. And I was like, this is God's plan for me. Like, this is true. And so I just remember being so excited because it was like, okay, if the plan of salvation is true, it comes from the Book of Mormon. And if the Book of Mormon is true, then Joseph Smith was a prophet. And then like literally after that, it's like dominoes from there, just falling dominoes. And I was so excited, but I was also so scared because I had just like really loved my life and my church and all my friends at my church and they were just basically my family.
Mm-hmm.
And you were really involved from like such a young age that it would be hard to like switch that up, you know?
Yeah. And there's just such
sure.
a negative connotation with the church. So I was just like, oh man, how am I going to do this by myself? But I was like, I can do this. And I remember the bishop being like, it's going to get really hard. And I was like, okay. So I was like, well, let's plan a baptismal date and like, let's move forward with this. And so I had all of these experiences and everything was good. And I was kind of going to both churches just to keep the peace. And then I felt like it was time to like tell my pastor like that I believed in these things and that I was going to get rebaptized into the church. And so one day I like texted them, which it's really weird to meet with a pastor. Like you don't meet with a pastor like you meet with the bishop. So I was like, hey, pastor, like, can I meet with you? He was like, sure. And he has such a sweet and warm smile. And, but he's such a smart person. So I go into that and, small talk. And then he's like, what do you want to talk about? And I was like, well, like, I like have friends that are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And he was like, yeah. And I was like, well, I believe in what they believe. And he was like, I was like, yeah, I believe in the Book of Mormon. And I'm going to get baptized in the church. And he was like, 3 heavens and everything. And I was like, yep, 3 heavens and everything. I believe all that. And the response I got was something I should have expected, but for some reason wasn't expecting. And out of good faith, because he's trying to keep like his flock together, and I trust this person so much, he just kind of looked at me and was like, Cheyenne, I can't believe you've been deceived by these people. Like you have such a strong testimony and you let your guard down and these people have gotten into you. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah,
wow.
like if you keep going down this path, like it's gonna be really bad for you. And I was like, why? Like I felt the Spirit, like in Galatians that says like the Spirit is love and peace and gentleness. I felt all that, and it was just really the same response. Like it's Satan, it's a different God, it's a different Jesus that Satan has created. And I was like, okay. And he gave me like a stack of like anti-Mormon books that were like this big, and he was like, you need to read all this. And I was like, so I went away from that, like, just, like, my little teeny tiny testimony just, like, crushed. And it was so small. Like, I don't think I was ready to, like, defend the faith like that, like, up front like that. And so I went home, and another counsel he gave me was, like, don't talk to the missionaries. Don't talk to your friends anymore. Stay away from the bishop. Like, stay away from all of that, or, like, it's just going to be bad. So that was, like, sad because they had also become, like, a part of my life. And so I went home, and I read all these anti-Mormon books, and sure, maybe 1 or 2 had a good point, or like, oh, okay, I could look into that more, but it was mostly just like ickiness and like gunk and like just blah. And so like from that time to like graduating high school was just like a very low point and just like sad. And a lot of people at church, the church I was attending, were just kind of disappointed in me. Like I felt like this youth that like the kids could like look up to, and like I was just like a dependable person, and then all of a sudden I was this girl that struggled with her testimony and like need to be careful of her and give her extra attention and like tell her I'm praying for you, sweetie, and bless your heart. And you're like, okay. And so and that's just kind of what it felt like. It was just gloomy. And then I was in college now, or no, lies. I was not in college yet. I was about to go into college. And I started teaching VBS, and VBS is something, it's called Vacation Bible School, and like it's this week-long like day camp for kids where you teach. And so when they told me that I could like be a part of like a group and like could teach it and stuff, I felt kind of like, okay, I'm back on my high horse. Like they trust me again. I'm getting responsibilities again. And that was like really great. And after that, I was driving home from VBS, and I saw the chapel that I went to and had that really powerful experience. And before, there was like a bunch of trees around this chapel, and now all of a sudden there's like a neighborhood built up, and I was like, oh, it's so close. And I had this thought to me that was like, I need to go and apologize to all those people that I I wasted all of their time. They were so sweet, like teaching me their faith. Like they invited me to all of these things and I like blew them off and I felt so horrible about it. So I was like, okay, the next Sunday I'm going to go to church. And after my church, I like went to the foyer and I could not remember for the life of me what time church started. So I sat in the foyer for a very, very long time and I was just waiting and waiting. And I just like forgot that multiple wards met in one building. And so I was like, I don't recognize any of these people. So I just thought like, just wait. And so I sat there for like maybe like an hour and a half and it got quiet and this man like walked through and he was like, oh, are you supposed to be in Young Women's? And I was like, no. And he was like, oh, okay, do you need help finding the release study room? And I was like, I don't know what that is. And he was like, oh, have you ever been to church here before? And I was like, yes, I have been to church here before. And he was like, oh, okay, like, cool. Like, have you met the missionaries? And I was like, yeah, I have met the missionaries. And I actually was going to get baptized. And I don't know why I said that. And he was like, cool, tell me the story. And I literally just told him everything that I've told you now. And when I brought up, like, kind of like why I didn't join the church, he was like, you felt the Spirit. And I was like, oh, but my pastor said it wasn't the Spirit. And he's like, Cheyenne, you shouldn't let other people tell you what you felt. You felt it. And that was like God witnessing to you that was true. And for some reason, that little tiny thing, like, why didn't I think of that before? Was just like, oh, you're right. Like, and to give me some credit, like I was just a teenager. Like, of course I like trusted in my leaders and wanted to like respect them and like do what's right in the sight of their eyes. And
well, and you had like this very small testimony from this new church that it was very new to you, and it was going up against this other church that was so much, like it was so much bigger. That's what you knew,
time,
so
that was such a little tiny thing, but just, like a little seed. And then all of a sudden he was like, oh, well, my my church is over, so I have to go and be with my family. And I was like, oh, bye. Like, we just had this realization with you. And then at that very moment, I saw like deacons that I recognized, and I was like, ooh, and they like opened up the chapel doors, and I was like, okay, this is the one. And instead of going in and like apologizing to everyone, I sat in the metal chairs that no one wants to sit in the overflow. And I was like, I really need to sit down and like think about some things. And like church was going on, and like they started passing the sacrament. And as they were passing the sacrament, I just had this really big, like, witness that, like, I felt like God was telling me that I didn't know everything about the church, but that I really needed to be here and I need to get baptized. And I was like, okay, I trust you, but I was also really sad. Like, I don't really want this to be true because, like, I finally just got back, like, on track. But I was like, okay, like, I'll trust God. And then I went up to the missionaries and I was like, hi, my name's Cheyenne. I need to get baptized. And they were like, almost fell over dead. And I went up to the bishop and I was like, hi, it's nice to see you again. I need to get baptized. And he's like, I know. And so I started meeting with the missionaries again. And instead of like meeting with them like in my home or things like that, I was meeting with them like at public places, like the frozen yogurt bar or like this. And even though I wasn't like telling anybody now, like, cause I was really like cautious because I needed to like learn more, but I would like run into my teachers and they'd like be like, Cheyenne, come here. And I'd pull aside and they're like, they're Mormons, right? And I'm like, yeah, I do know they're Mormons. She was like, okay, like, do you need any help? Like, do me take you home? And I'd be like, no, I'm fine. Like, these are my friends. And they'd be like, okay, just like, let me know. And I'd be like, okay, that's weird. Like, and I kept on like running into people like that being like, Cheyenne, like, do you know what you're doing? And I was like, okay, if I don't get it from my church, I get it from like the community. Yeah. So that was like hard. And then I like set a baptismal date. And I did it the week that my parents were out of town. So that, like, it would just not be as contentious, and I wanted it to be something that I remembered. And my friend who introduced the gospel to me at the very beginning was on a mission now, and so I just remember, like, going to my baptism and just being so scared and being like, this better be true. Like, I am changing a lot for you, God, and I want this to be right. And so, like, getting into the water, I was, like, shaky, and I was like, because it's just, I was afraid, and I think back on now, and I'm like, it's okay to be afraid and have faith. Yeah, because that's when you
absolutely two things can be true at once.
Yeah, and you can like trust. And I remember getting into the water, and as they were baptizing me, I felt so like just peaceful. And I got up and I was like, oh, I'm so glad I did that. Like, that was so good. And the next day I got confirmed, and just like the Ward family was so sweet and amazing. And I kept it a secret for a really long time, and I was double dutying it. And I had like great calling, but I also wasn't ready. But there came a point where I was like, okay, you can't serve two masters. Like, you have to do it. And so I kind of just like disappeared and was like, I'm just in college. Like, I'm really busy. And that was like an easy way. And my family definitely struggled with it once they found out. I think it's because it wasn't the choice that they wanted me to make. They wanted me to do other things, and they were okay with the church I was a part of, but this was a little too much.
Yeah.
And so some of my family like disowned me, and like it was really, really hard to like, and I wasn't as afraid to tell them as much as I was afraid to tell my friends at church. So they were like kind of like the soft, but it was really, really hard. And so, and it just like awkward around my family for a little bit. And so I just moved in with a family, and that was like such a great blessing because it was like consistency and like just regular life, like regular faithful life. And it was really nice. And the parents of this family, they are converts, and they had all these movies from like the 80s, like missionary like I guess the missionaries used to give out like little DVDs and stuff, and I loved watching them. I don't know what it was about the nostalgia of this, but I loved it. And there was one video of like missionaries like in the 80s like being missionaries, and like how excited they were to share the gospel and to serve. And I was like, I want to be like that. And it had only been 2 months from my baptism. I was like, isn't that kind of early for that? But as they were like sharing like their experience being missionaries, I was just like, my life is kind of hard right now. It's really difficult, but I have learned so much from it. And the knowledge was almost just more valuable than like my emotions or like it was just like worth it. And it was just such a spiritual momentum to like just push through these hard things. And so I went to the bishop and I was like, I want to serve a mission. And he was like, okay, like let's do some mission prep and stuff. And he was like, have you told like friends from your church? And I was like, no, I haven't. And so I was preparing to go on a mission, and my uncle was like, hey, like, I know you want to be a missionary. There's this really cool musical called The Book of Mormon. And I was like, oh, okay. And I went to it, and I remember like sitting there like, and afterwards, like, I was like, I have to serve a mission for the church. Like, people are so confused. Like, this is so not right.
I love that so much.
I was like, thanks for taking me. And I remember telling a lot of members, like, you went to that? And I was like, yeah. And it was so great. Like, I am going to, like, be momentous. And so I got my mission call 9 months after my baptismal date. And I got called to serve in New Zealand. And that was really exciting. And so now I've been a baptized member. I'm going on a mission. And I was like, I need to tell people. And what is the fastest way you tell everybody?
Social media?
Yeah. Facebook.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So I went on there with my little picture and my little red like skirt that I was so excited to wear with my little call. And I just said, I am serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I'm serving in Auckland, New Zealand.
Wow.
Woo!
That's huge.
And a lot of the comments were like, Cheyenne, I didn't know you went to the Mormon church. You need to call the pastor. I thought you had your head screwed on right. Like all of these like really condescending, like, but also in good faith, like, what are you doing? Like, this is bad. Like, you need to do something about this. And I should have expected that, but I was just like, well, they all know now. And then there would be like that one like silver lining, like from Sister Zoc that was like, you're doing so great, Cheyenne. I'm so excited for you. And I was like, thank you. Like, it was just so sweet to see those little like,
Yeah.
the Nutella and the crazy sandwich.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that's like so sweet and nice. And so I'm like preparing to go on my mission. And then I get phone calls from a lot of people from my church that are like, hey, come to dinner with us. And I'm like, okay. Because I had been so used to like going to dinner with like random families in the church.
Yeah.
This is so part of our culture. And I was like, okay, yeah, sure, I'll go to dinner. And it was nice. It was cordial until they were like, oh, here's a really confrontational thing about the church, like polygamy and priesthood bans and all this. And I just remember it like really not fazing me, but just being so hurt that like they had known me and they had seen my testimony like blossom when I was attending this church and just knew I loved the Savior. And so for them to be like, I can't believe you're letting people tell you what to believe in, it was just so hurtful to me. And I just remember like pulling out like my half-read Book of Mormon and my teeny tiny Article of Faith card and just testifying to them and being like, I just know that this is true. And they would just scoff at me and just be like, oh, like, Cheyenne, like, we'll pray for you. And just, and it was so sad because it just, these people just meant so much to me. And it just happened like over and over again, like meeting with the children's pastor, and he was just like, ugh. And I used to babysit his children, and now I'm not allowed to babysit his kids anymore because I'm a bad influence. And it like hurt me so much. And it was just really isolating because yes, I had this super amazing new Ward family, but I don't know them as well. And now I don't know, like my family doesn't want to be a part of my life. Like my old friends that were my best friends don't want to be a part of my life. So it was really sad. And I found a lot of like solace in the Savior and in the atonement and in my bunk bed because I had all these super cool paintings of all these Old Testament prophets and like going through lions' dens and just all these like faith promoting like Old Testament stories. And I just would look at that and be like, if they went through all those hard things, like famines, droughts, like giant storms, lions, like I can do this little tiny thing. And so I just kind of left and I went on my mission and I had the most wonderful experience and I learned so much. And my testimony, of course, deepened and I loved sharing the gospel and it was so fun. And I come home and I really don't talk to any of those people from my church anymore. And that still like hurts me, but my new life is so much more worth it. Yeah. It's, I'm just so happy. And I think the best thing that I've learned that is that I can have joy and a perfect brightness of hope that, when I'm going through hard things, it's all to prepare me. It's not because God is punishing me. It's because like God is preparing me for something so much more. And so opposition is good and trials are good and hard things are so good for us. And so, yeah, I went to BYU, Idaho. I got married and I have a sweet little baby girl and I had healed so many relationships with my family and they're not totally on board with it, but they are more tolerant with it. And there are definitely some members of my family that I still don't talk to and it's still very contentious, but it's just proof that the Spirit works in people and like something that they were so against before. Like, and they've seen our lives or my life and how I've like lived the gospel. It's like, okay, this isn't a bad thing. Yeah. And I love that. I love how God works like that. Yeah. So
absolutely. And speaking of God working, I feel like, you lost a lot of people throughout the way, but at the same time, you were gaining people from the very beginning. Your friends at school who were LDS, and then like people in the church who would invite you to dinners and sit with you. Even that man who just stopped and chatted with you about why you weren't baptized yet.
He spoke at my baptism, and I've never seen him again.
That is wild. So I feel like every step of the way, the Lord was, with you, and there's just so much evidence in that, and you clearly felt it. It's just so beautiful.
Thank you.
Yes. So thank you so much for coming today, Cheyenne. This was such an awesome story, and I absolutely loved listening to you. If anybody in the audience, anybody listening has any questions for you, are they okay to put those down in the comments?
Yes, yeah.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you guys for watching, and we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye.